Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. This show is produced and broadcast from Portland, Oregon, USA. Now, for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is we have decided to talk about. My guest this evening will be Chris Thorne, who will be in about 10 minutes or so because he's late getting here because I gave him the wrong directions. I apologize, Chris. And in the meantime, I'm going to share a couple of pieces that I have here before Chris gets here. And I think he would be satisfied with the captions talking about this show being about him, as I'm taking more of his time. So the first one is a fun one that I got some time ago, and I think I'll entertain you with that. And then the other one goes for a little longer than the fun one, and it's rather serious, but it's topical about what's going on in our country today. And I'll do that one next. So bear with me as I tell you about, in case you're having a rough day, it's about a stress management technique recommended in all the latest psychological journals. The funny thing is that it really does work and will make you smile. Number one, picture yourself lying on your belly on a warm rock that hangs out over a crystal clear stream. Number two, picture yourself with both your hands dangling in the cool running water. Birds are sweetly singing in the cool mountain air. No one knows your secret place. You are in total seclusion from that hectic place called the world. The soothing sound of a gentle waterfall fills the air with a cascade of serenity. The water is so clear that you can make out the face of the congressman or senator you're holding underwater. See, it worked. You're smiling already, huh? You feel better already? Okay, so much for that. My director's laughing at me. Now I've got a rather serious one. There's so much serious stuff going on in the world today. This is something that I feel pretty strongly about. This is from Truth Out. And Alicia Garza wrote this. It's dated Friday, 19 June 2015. I'm editing down from a longer piece so that it fits in with our time frame. It starts, a mourner grieves during a prayer vigil. Wednesday night in Charleston, South Carolina, an act of terrorism was committed against a group of black people who gathered in prayer. The church, Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church, was a site of slave rebellions as far back as 1822 and one of the oldest black churches in the country. Yesterday, a 21-year-old white man named Dylan Storm Roof was arrested, suspected to be the gunman in this brutal and horrific tragedy. The question we should be asking today is, who taught Roof to hate black people? Enough to kill 9 of us in a sanctuary? And can we really say that he is the only one? The honest answer is to the above question is that this country has never valued black people, even though black people have been of extreme value for this country. Where are the calls for accountability for those who taught a young white man to harbor such a serious hatred for black people? Where is the accountability for a nation that has racism in its very DNA? We were never meant to survive. We were stolen from our families and our land, brought to this country in the bottoms of boats, chained together like animals. We were forced to work for nurture and nourish, and build a country that never truly considered us human and still refuses to honor our humanity. The founding documents of this country designate us as only 3/5 of a human being. We were never meant to survive. We argue that Rufe's actions are not isolated, are not easily and dismissively attributed to mental illness, but instead are reflections of a disease that plagues this country, racism. And we argue that until we grapple as a nation with the racist violence that infects this country, we will only see such acts increase. Rufe's words remind us that black people in this country cannot consider ourselves safe anymore. We cannot expect protection from the police. Across the country and increasingly around the world, black people, young, old, and middle-aged, disabled and differently abled, queer, transgender, immigrant, incarcerated, and more, have erupted in a wave of rebellion that has transformed our political landscape. And yet there are still those who, in the face of extreme and unnecessary violence, will use that as an opportunity to call for peace, to distort the real issues, to essentially neutralize what has been bubbling under the surface for a very long time. But where are the calls for accountability? For those who taught a young white man to harbor such a serious hatred for black people? Where is the accountability for a nation that has racism in its very DNA? We as a country, in the face of even more black lives taken way before their time, have a choice to make. It is no longer a question of whether or not racism exists, nor is it a question of whether or not racism is an epidemic that plagues our very existence. The choice we have to make is whether or not we are willing to take it on in a real way. Our lives, quite literally, depend on it. There's a very, very sick young man. And the media and the television has been talking about people's reactions, including the relatives of the people who were killed and the pastor, and there seems to be a lot of forgiveness being talked about and not enough accountability, and talking about why this young man got to be the way that he was. I'm waiting for time to pass so we can see how this is going to finish and how the effect of it is going to be appreciated in the rest of the world. The Confederate flag is being looked at in terms of whether it should fly over state capitals and all over the country. There's a real looking at what's going on in our country because of guilt or whatever reason, but that doesn't matter. What matters is we're looking now and see if we can change things enough so that we can eliminate the conditions that produce guys like this killer and produce the sadness and anger in black people that cause them to rebel at police brutality. And police all over the country in many cities who are using excessive violence to take care of black people. So much for that. I have a lot of questions for our guest when he gets here. The title of the show is Rwanda, A Bittersweet Experience. Chris Thorne is a world traveler. He's been involved in projects in Africa and even in Vietnam in various capacities. And he was a deucedly interesting character when I met him not too long ago and decided to have him come on and tell you, my viewers, about his experiences, particularly in Africa, where he was involved in a project establishing a fish farm so that those people could have some sort of activity to fill their time and be self-sustaining. So let us take a break now for a few minutes, and then we'll be back in a little while. Okay, we're back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, you're watching Conversations with Dr. Don. It's an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individual. And my guest this evening is Chris Thorne, who is indeed unique, and you will see what I'm talking about as time goes on. And we're going to talk about Rwanda, a bittersweet experience. How are you feeling right now?
Oh, I feel fine. I'm enjoying Portland. I've only been here about 6 weeks now, but I'm enjoying it a great deal.
I'm glad you are, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a nice place to live.
And you're not going to beat me up for giving you the wrong direction on how to get here.
I'm well beyond beating people up anyway.
Yeah.
But, and I have to deal with your motto here, you know. I try to be kind, even to people who force me into Portland traffic, both ways.
See, he said he wasn't mad. You're a courageous man. You're wonderful. Okay, let's get going. Let's talk about who you are personally for a bit, and then we'll get into this many, many pages of history and bio on you.
I've been
you must
busy.
have lived 14 lives, for God's sakes.
Well, sometimes it feels that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You were born
On a mountaintop, no, I was born in West Virginia, you know,
West Virginia. When was that?
in the Kanawha Valley back in 1937. So
37.
I am your younger brother.
Thank you. That's a real honor. A trick question. I have one or two for you.
Sure.
Why were you born?
Why was I born? That's a question you'd have to ask my dad, who is deceased, my mom, who is gone away someplace,
Yeah.
and we don't really know exactly where, but that's another interesting story about her. But she's 100 years old this year, but we don't know where she is.
Okay. Why do you think you were born? I'm talking about your thought.
Well, my dad's from Barbados, and I think part of that is machismo. I think he'd already had one son, and I think he wanted to see if he could help make another one. And he did. But the surprise package was waiting for him when we went back up to New York, because that's where my sister was born, about 5 years after I was.
And then there were two of you.
No, my elder brother was born 2 years before me.
Yes.
And he was the reason that my dad was the head of the English department at a small black college called West Virginia State College, which is now West Virginia State University, outside of Charleston, in a little town called Institute, West Virginia.
How'd you get to look the way that you do? Because when I saw you the first time in that parking lot, I thought, there's one of my brothers or my cousin or somebody.
No, I thought you were my brother. You know, I looked out of there and I said, my God, this in the parking lot of a hotel? You know, I said, wow, where'd this guy come from? We do look a lot alike. My dad's from Barbados, which begins to explain part of it, because it's a multicultural society and has been for hundreds of years. My mom's from West Virginia, and Ohio. People came west from Virginia to what became West Virginia, and then also migrated up into southern
So
and
there's
central
white
Ohio.
and black. Is there also red in there?
Yeah,
somewhere that you
you'll
can
find white folks in the woodpile, in various generations. Yeah, I'm sure.
tell? I've never heard it put quite that way before, but I like that one.
Yeah,
too.
right.
Talk a little bit about your cultural heritage or racial heritage that would be of interest to our viewers.
I'm an African American
Why aren't you black?
because I'm not. I'm brown.
Okay.
No, black's a color, and I think that some of our leaders during the '60s felt the need to put a handle on something that people could grab hold of, and also you could turn negatives into positives, and to black is beautiful. Black Lives Matter is the evolutionary process that brought us to this point. But I define myself as an African American because my father taught me that to be free, the first step was to define who I am, not to allow anybody else to define me. And the second was to take responsibility for everything I do.
So African American, is that white African American or black African? Because they are white Africans.
Yeah,
I'm going to tease you now and then. You can throw it back at me too.
No, you're absolutely right. I don't know any of my white relatives. They were a ways back in the genealogy. And I can only speak to the main reason I define myself that way is because that's how I feel I am. I would prefer to identify myself as part of the rich heritage that's been ripped away from us than to define myself in any other way. And that's the way I've grown up. That's a lot of growing up. I don't know how much I've grown, but it's a lot of getting older, let me put it that way.
Are you still growing?
Oh yeah, till I stop breathing, I guess.
I'm sorry we have a limited amount of time because we need 2 or 3 hours for you, but it's going to be a good show, I promise you.
Okay.
Anything more about cultural heritage? You talked about Barbados and the West Indies. Anything more at all?
Well,
maybe there is?
Yeah, I know that in West Virginia there's a very solid part of my family that has a very rich history there, and in Virginia, and in the slave culture and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I know a good deal about that. My grandmother came to live with us during the Second World War when my mom and dad were working. And she, in great respect, in many great ways, she was the person that had most to do with us during the very formative years between 1940 and 1946, 47. So she taught me a lot about wildcrafting and about all kinds of other things that went on in the hills of West Virginia, and a lot of other things, and about African American history and the like.
Do you have a religious preference?
No, none.
Did you ever have a religious preference?
I was christened in the Episcopalian Church, which is Anglican essentially.
Yeah.
And my parents were always seeking and looking around and doing all sorts of things in terms of investigating life's various aspects, and that's what they taught us to do. They moved toward the Baha'i faith when I was about, I guess, maybe 8 or 9 years old. I even went to a Baha'i camp up in Maine, and for a summer. In the Baha'i faith, you reach a point in adolescence where you have to come before a committee of the fellows and commit yourself to the faith and to what you're doing. And I didn't feel like doing that, so I just wandered around looking at different religions and decided there were some very good aspects of each religion that I found kind of interesting, but none of them that I wanted to embrace in any kind of a dogmatic or pedantic way.
Are you an atheist or
agnostic? You say that? Am I an atheist?
That's how people talk to me when I say I'm an atheist. You're an atheist?
Buddhist philosophy teaches, one of the statements in Buddhist philosophy is that if life is a corridor, then death is a door. And I think that embodies what I think of. I have absolutely no idea what's on the other side of that door. In Buddhism, they also believe in reincarnation, but since I don't remember my incarnate lives, I don't know what use that is. So, as I said, I pick and choose. I cherry pick religious philosophy and just reduce religion and stick with philosophy.
I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad I'm here. I'm glad I'm here too.
And so your formal education, say a few words about that.
I have, or at least I know I had it one time. I have several times in my life lost everything, every material possession that I've had. So my only so-called degree would be from Public School 69 in Jackson Heights, New York, where I graduated from the 8th grade. At the top of my class. But I got into a very good high school down on the Lower East Side of New York, Stuyvesant High School. And it was the first time I had actually been into the city on my own, so the city being Manhattan as opposed to Queens,
Sure.
where I had been since I was about 3, and my brother 5 when we came up. That was my dad coming back to New York where he grew up. I fell in love with the city, mainly the street. And I had a good time on the street, but I was definitely not going to get out. So I haven't graduated from anything. I've been to Stuyvesant. I've been to City College in New York, which is now CUNY, I guess. And where else have I been? To West Virginia State College, back and forth. Harvard Graduate School. But I never graduated from any of them.
Yeah. It's
from the
incredible.
Kennedy
You can
School.
say that, and you've got 40 pages or so of your bio and history.
That only started in
done.
1964.
Oh my gosh.
That's after I got out of the Army.
What are you doing now besides
Kicking
looking
back.
and seeking, kicking back? All right.
I came back in 2011 from Rwanda, and I was tired. 15 years of wrestling with the farm, both
15 years.
getting it, developing it, and then fighting with the government to try to get the things that they said they wanted to do done. And then, as I said earlier before we started the program, becoming the victims of our own success. It was a very successful endeavor, but when I came back to the States, I realized I had perhaps stayed a little bit too long at the fair. And
So that's why you characterize it as a bittersweet experience.
Bitter. Well, you can take sweet first. It's my wife is Rwandan, and my dad always taught me that a gentleman always sees his lady home. And she had come out of Rwanda with her family and grown up in Burundi. That was after the 1959 genocide, the one the world doesn't even know about, and now credits perhaps 100 to 200,000.
These are African countries.
Well, this is Rwanda, essentially.
Yes.
In 1959, there was a genocide, an uprising within the country, and some 200,000 Tutsis were killed, but 1.5 million fled Rwanda for the 5 countries around Rwanda, and then off to Europe and North America and Canada. So there was a diaspora, but the larger part of that diaspora was right in the countries that surround Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, then Zaire, and Burundi.
I'm still smiling at how you characterize your education. I dropped out of junior high school.
School of hard knocks, basically.
But then I went back many years later and kept going till I finally got a PhD when I was 47 years old.
I'm not a very good student in a formal situation. I do well with the things that I like to do, but I am, in a great many respects, I've spoiled myself. I learn a lot of stuff without ever having gone. I don't know who it was, Oscar Wilde or somebody, who said that he was not going to let formal schooling interfere with his education.
Okay. And you mentioned your partner, your wife.
My wife, Susanna Mukogijana Murara, my heart.
Where is she now?
She's in Kigali. I talked to her the day before yesterday.
How is she?
Well, she came to visit me in Santa Rosa, California, for the month of May. She said she was going to stay a week, but I managed to convince her to stay a month. But she has business and projects that she's working there. She writes children's books in the Kinyarwanda language, the local language, and she works with children to get them to write books, to write their stories, traditional stories.
Do you have children?
I have one daughter with Susanna. I have 2 sons with my first wife, and 1 son born between marriages.
You've been around some.
A bit.
Yeah. Your political persuasion, your life.
That's the
left,
sweet
right,
part
or
is getting
center.
her home, because she hadn't been home since '59,
Okay.
and we went back in '96.
And she's glad to be back home.
Yeah. Most Africans, regardless of color, most Africans are really, really wed to the dirt. And I mean, it's spiritual, it's physical, it's all encompassing. They got to touch their own dirt, and when they do, they're re-energized. And
Efo Fugard, that name mean anything to you?
Fugard.
Efo.
Yeah, right. He's a playwright from South Africa.
Yeah, I love his work.
So do I. That I've seen. I haven't seen all of his stuff. I've read more than I've seen.
Yeah. So are you left, right, center? How would you characterize yourself on the continuum, political continuum?
I'm a hardcore, dyed-in-the-wool, to the marrow of my bones independent. No political affiliations. I vote people, their track records, what they do, not what they talk about. Don't have much use for practical politics. It's a soul destroyer. However, it doesn't mean I can't get involved by voting and doing all of the things, getting involved in a number of different ways. I'm talking about if I feel that, whether it's petitions or standing with other people who feel the same way I do in a protest. I come from basically a union background, both sides of my family. They're union organizers for the last 2 or 3 generations. So
Are you a Hillary supporter or Bernie Sanders or Ted Cruz?
I think more like Bernie Sanders is. I would hope that Bernie Sanders could draft Elizabeth Warren, somehow twist her arm, her shoulder, her neck, get her to come on his ticket as the vice president. I think if he would come on early with Elizabeth Warren as his vice presidential candidate, he'd wipe the floor with the rest of the candidates.
And you tell me you're independent, but those kinds of sentiments for who's running to lead our country?
Yeah, I can do both of those.
Those are radical leftists.
So what? So radical leftists then. But those tags, you can't really apply those tags,
Well, there are tags, and then there are also things that we say that have some sort of meaning beyond just being simply tags.
That's true. If they speak to who you are, then I'll wear the tag proudly.
Okay. Memberships in political, social organizations that come to mind for you. You belong to any of those things?
I belong to AARP.
AARP? You're too young for that.
Why? I'm 77 years old.
You're just a kid.
I'm just a kid. You can say that. See? Yeah, I don't Netflix. I'm not Netflix. I don't Facebook. I don't Twitter.
Neither me.
I'm enrolled in LinkedIn, but that's the only online kind of organization.
I don't know what that is. I gave up on that
LinkedIn
stuff
is
before you
basically, it's supposed to be people in professions who are so-called professions.
I know what it is, yeah.
Yeah, I thought you might. But, because I have a problem with the whole idea of professions. My dad told me a professional is anybody who can provide a quality product on a regular basis and be dependable in that.
Okay.
He said a professional makes the difficult seem easy and the impossible seem doable.
Is there anything you don't have an answer for, a reasonable comment about? It seems to me I could ask you anything and you'd have some sort of a thought-out comment.
Thought out. Can I tell you a little story? My mother and I she was washing dishes, I was drying. I was 9 years old, and something happened in my head, and a dish slipped and hit the floor. And my mother looked at me and she said, "Chris, this is what I've been talking to you about. Concentrate on what you're doing. Focus on what you're doing. You're always going off half-cocked. Stop and think about what you're doing before you do it." I said, "I do, Mama, but I just do it faster." And part of what was throwing me was there were things that go on in my mind. It's sort of like putting your foot on the clutch when you haven't eased back on the accelerator. And when I was 9 years old, I didn't know how to deal with it, and it caused me to kind of jerk around a little bit, or actions would freeze even if the plate was going from here to here, and it would hit the floor. And she never talked to me about it again. She understood exactly what I was saying. I have a feeling it might have happened to her in her youth as well.
You're dangerous.
Yeah, I am. Many people have said that for all the wrong but for all the wrong reasons. You might be saying it for the right reason.
Let me ask you, any persons from the past or alive today that you particularly admire or look up to?
Who are alive today?
Or from the past, either one.
From the past.
Any names that...
I met Nelson Mandela in Swaziland after he got out of jail.
Did you really?
Yeah. I was the representative for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees in Swaziland. And he came to visit the king of Swaziland, and so the diplomatic corps was there, and UN representatives are part of the diplomatic corps. But I had a chance to talk to him for about maybe 3 or 4 minutes.
Really?
To hold on to his hand and to be encompassed.
Which hand was it?
This hand.
Can I touch it?
You're shaking the hand that shook Nelson Mandela's hand, right? And it was an incredible experience. All the other stuff, all of the history, all of the almost idolizing of him as a young person, as a person growing up, just fell away, and it was just to be with him. And there's a warmth that just
really
takes you away.
All right. So anybody alive today that you particularly admire?
And I particularly admire. You know, I haven't even thought. You talk about having a ready answer for every question you ask. I haven't even thought about that.
I work at stumping people.
You're good at stumping people.
I work at it.
You work at it.
No, make you think.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'd have to let me put that in a part of my head and think about it.
Apparently, you're like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth
No, I know
Warren.
somebody I'd really like to sit down and talk. That's Wynton Marsalis.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to sit down and
There's
talk to
some
Wynton
depth there,
Marsalis. He's an
man.
incredible guy.
Yeah. So before the other, let's move on from this personal stuff and talk about what you're here about. Really, Rwanda, a bittersweet experience. I got a little list of cheat questions here to sort of guide us along. Cheat. I like to cheat a lot. In our discussion here, what did I do with them? You kept them over there. See that?
Oh, are these the questions you were looking for? Yeah.
So, in your material you gave me, you had it organized in private sector development experience. What does that mean, private sector development experience?
My basic private sector development experience is with the Kagimbe fish farm. It's something I had wanted to do for a long time, but I spent most of my adult life has been spent in international and domestic civil service and in the military.
You worked for the UN?
Pardon?
You worked for the UN?
I worked for the UN for 17, almost 18 years.
Oh my gosh.
And that's for the High Commissioner for Refugees.
How'd you get that job?
I met a guy walking down the street in Washington. I had fallen between two stools, so to speak. A lady named Carolyn Payton, who was the overall head of Peace Corps for, unfortunately, a short period of time during the time that Carter was president. We met in a little tiny country surrounded by South Africa called Lesotho.
Oh, yes.
And I had been working there I was on the second year of a contract with a management consultant firm that was doing work in what then was the words were management by objective, teaching people how to plan and manage by objective.
Yeah.
You remember that, right?
I think so.
Back in the day.
Back in the day.
All right. So I had gone out there. I had resigned from my good government job in '73, the day after Ford pardoned Richard Nixon. And I said, I've had enough of this. I'm out of here. So that was the end of my 7 years of civil service. I had had over 3 years of military service. And I came out to Cal, and I was working with some guys doing some other stuff, community stuff, that sort of thing. And they offered me a chance to take this job in Lesotho. I get offered a lot of jobs because nobody else wants to work, in the middle of South Africa or with apartheid all around you, or or it's dangerous or something. But that's never stopped me. So being dangerous is not the point. The point is, am I really having a good time?
Did you ever experience any threats, strong unease because of your environment and the people you were hanging out with?
That's a good question, I guess. I spent over 2 years in Vietnam. There were a lot of times that I was, in fact, I'm very much concerned about my well-being. The first year that I was in Vietnam, I was working with, they had an oddball idea about people trying to develop stuff in the middle of that conflict. And they were looking for people with backgrounds in development who had also had experience as soldiers and had experience in Vietnam. And I satisfied some of those requirements, but I ended up as one of the 13 civilian district senior advisors in Vietnam during between 1967 and 1969.
Was that with AID?
Yes and no. We were attached to what was called MACORDS.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, but it basically even though we were directly assigned to both the military and civilian ambassadorial teams, okay, we were paid by USAID. And it was always kind of up in the air. But they had decided in areas where there weren't what were not so euphemistically called meat grinders, like I Corps or down in the Delta where there were Marines fighting or infantry fighting, and there was the actual true day-to-day combat situation. So they assigned, I think it was 14 of us. I think it was 13 of us, but they changed the number because everybody thought that would be kind of bad luck. But who were civilian district senior advisors. It meant that we were responsible for everything that went on in our districts within the coalition that was fighting,
sure,
military and civilian. So it's the best job, one of the best jobs I ever had in my life.
In Vietnam?
Yeah, we built a lot of stuff, and at night we go out and play stupid, silly games like hunting each other.
Yeah. We've jumped ahead now to Vietnam. Shall we go back to the fish farm?
Oh, yeah, anytime. We can go anywhere you want to go.
Well, keep in mind some of the things we wanted to touch on anyhow, because I want to have you back on when we have
Okay.
a full hour. Can we do that?
Sure.
Let's see how this comes out.
I'm not going anywhere. I'll be in Beaverton and in Portland I hope, for at least a couple of 3 years.
So where shall we go? Shall we go back? You want to say some more about the fish farm or what? Where
Sure.
shall we go?
Sure, fish farm's good. You were talking about sweet. I talked about getting my lady back home. I didn't talk about the fact that we also wanted our daughter, who is an African-American African, right? Her mom's an African, I'm an African-American. So Krista is either an African squared American or African cubed American, I don't know which. Anyway, but she's also a good part of my heart. Anyway, I wanted very much for her to be able to personally identify with the culture, with her mom's culture. I wanted her not to go directly into, she was getting close to adolescence. She was coming up on her 12th year. I wanted her to spend at least her high school years with her mother's family, with that part of our family that was in Rwanda. And I wanted her to be able to embrace that and to learn other languages than French and English.
Which languages did she learn?
Swahili and Kinyarwanda, as well as French and English.
Do you speak any of those?
I don't know.
You stayed with English.
I spoke Vietnamese fluently, but that was also a matter of, that was a good thing to do. It's very good to speak the language of the people who are very much involved in whether you live or die.
I think so.
I got some very good advice from the guy I replaced. He said, you've got about 2 weeks. I said, to do what? He said, to convince the people in the countryside that you're here for them, for their benefit. And if you do that, you won't get hit. And I said, I will do that.
What an interesting
And I did.
life.
Yeah, it's a good one. I've enjoyed it. Anyway, so the sweet part was to do that for my daughter as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the sweetest part of it was since 1976, when I went to Lesotho. In Lesotho, I didn't know anything about food and nutrition, and the way they had decided they wanted to learn about management by objectives was bringing together all of the food and nutrition programs, whether it's agriculture or health or whatever, bring all of the programs that had to do with food and nutrition together and develop a program and use that as the model through which we could teach all of the processes or the basic processes.
And the natives could then be successful in managing their own affairs?
The people of
Where you were.
Lesotho.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them natives. I don't like that term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Indigenous to the area, what? Okay, we'll let it go.
Yeah, let it go. Because no, there are a lot of terms that people use that need not be necessarily demeaning or diminishing, okay? But there are Rwandans, and there are Americans, and there are Canadians, and I think the sooner we get to looking at people in those terms and get away from who's indigenous and the association with indigenous and indigent, okay?
Okay.
Then we start dealing with people as people, all right? And what I came to teach nutritionists and health workers and administrators of the Ministry of Health, et cetera, people, ordinary people who came from Lesotho, who were Basotho, and me as some sort of polyglot strange dude from the United States.
Yeah.
All right? So I started studying before I took off to go to Lesotho. I started trying to cram on food and nutrition, and I came across some interesting statistics. The best food to flesh conversion is rabbits, and the second best is fish.
Uh-huh.
And when I got into Lesotho and I was moving around the country and talking to people, I kept thinking about the fact I really need to know more about aquaculture, because it seems to me that there are any number of places that I'm going to work in the world where this will be not only a basic and easy thing to do, it's made difficult by people who become experts, right? I'm not an expert. I'm like a plumber. I'm in a way like a master plumber or a master welder. I've spent a good deal of my life honing my skills in a particular area.
Yeah.
But I don't want to mystify it, because what I do is pretty simple. Getting people from point A to point B, building small towns and small villages. Yes, sometimes when people are about just finished fighting each other, or are maybe getting ready to start fighting again, and you do these things within an environment that's very peaceful to extremely dangerous.
How do you do that?
Relax and do it.
Uh-huh.
Don't get excited about it. Just do it like a plumber looks at a job, or a welder looks at what he wants to create when he's welding.
It seems to me the first consideration is you get them to like you to some degree.
Well, yeah, okay.
How do you do that?
Well, no, you don't. If you are honest with people and straightforward, and you have skills to bring to the game, and you're not demeaning them when you talk to them.
Not demeaning them.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Because most of the experts who come into a situation like that, I call it Tarzan and Jane in Africa when I'm talking about the experts. Sometimes Tarzan and Jane can be Africans, right? But they have a mentality that says, I'm quote unquote a professional. Like I told you, my dad said a plumber's a professional if he does a dynamite job and does it regularly and can deliver the product on time and does it consistently.
And doesn't
He's a pro.
demean the other human beings.
No, he can be a brain surgeon, he can be a mechanic, however, people who have spent a lot of time in school, all right, they have a tendency to closet themselves in little towers, in fortresses, right? And what I learned how to do is, basically, I'm a much maligned generalist. I'm a guy that is a jack of all trades. I know some things about a whole lot of different things, construction, health, whatever, okay? But what I can do is I can create bridges. I can be a bridge between people who speak not different dialects, but different languages. It's hard to get health guys and construction guys to speak the same language and get them to talk to the transportation guys. And when you throw the military guy into the mix, wow, the equation just goes, that's a confounding variable in a lot of situations, okay? So what does a generalist do? You build teams and you get the teams to work together. And while you're doing that, you say, hey, if I'm in charge of what's going on here, if I'm responsible for it, one thing you're going to be able to say, he was hard, but he was fair.
Okay.
And we got the job done. That's all I need. I don't need anything else. If I know that we've done the job, we've given it our best shot, and it's a solid job, that's cool. And it's fun. I'm a problem-solving junkie. That little piece of stuff that CBS did. I describe myself as I need at least 3 plates full of problems a day. That's been the biggest transition, biggest problem.
Do you eat fish?
I have in my life fished for steelheads on the Russian River for long ago, when there were steelheads still running fast and free through the Russian River back in the 70s.
Were you eating fish out of your fish farm?
Yeah, we ate fish out of our fish farm, chickens out of our fish farm, pork out of our fish farm, duck out of our fish farms, rabbits out of our fish farm. We sold most of the stuff, but we ate the surpluses, some of it.
How did you become uninvolved with that project, for want of a better word? We're probably about 5 or 6 more minutes before we're going to have to stop, and then we're going to pick this up later on in the next time we get together.
Okay. How did I get uninvolved? The government, particularly in the person...
That's the bitter part, huh?
Yeah, that's the bitter part. There's the government in the form of the president, from the time he was vice president to the time he became president, when he was the titular vice president, but has always been in charge. Paul Kagame lied to us, as he lied to a whole lot of people. He told people he really wanted to build a country where people would be able to move freely and feel good about each other, and that there could be a reconciliation between the people who slaughtered and the people who were slaughtered, or who survived the slaughter. And he said he wanted to build an economic dynamo. And that's what we tried to help do in a small way.
Yeah.
And when we began to become successful at it, they rolled logs down that hill all the way from the beginning. I just had a blind spot. I wanted to do the job so much, and I was so confident that I could convince anybody of anything, that I didn't want to look at the danger signals. And it was taking a terribly long time to even get on the ground. But I stuck to it, and I said, I've won through in situations like this. What broke that camel's back was a visit by the African Development Bank, had a mission going to 6 countries in our region, including Rwanda, to look at aquaculture. My wife ran into a high school schoolmate of hers at the famous Hotel Rwanda, c'est la Mille Collines, okay? And they got to talking, and she asked, my wife asked her what she was doing. She told her. She said, when are you coming to Kigembe? She said, what's Kigembe? She said, you mean you've been here for 2 weeks and nobody's told you that the largest fish farm in Eastern and Central Africa is operating 150 kilometers to the south? She said, we'll come down tomorrow. They went down, they took the tour, they got through the tour. The guy who was leading the mission said to me, can you provide 6 million fingerlings a year, 8 million fingerlings a year from this farm? And I had been prepared by my wife calling me, and I gave him a flip chart and showed him within 3 pages. I said, I can dedicate a third of my 32 production ponds, okay? I can dedicate them to fingerlings, and this will show you how we can produce 11 million a year.
And you were that prepared to talk to him?
Yeah. Prior planning prevents piss poor performance.
Watch your language, it's a family show. No, that's sick.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah, I will. I'm sorry.
No problem, no problem. No biggie.
That's a military adage. It's kind of hard to use the military adage without being a little bit vulgar.
And it's
okay.
You
know what they did? They gave the government, they offered the government $20 million grant based upon what they had seen at our farm. And when he left and said he was going to do that, they were getting ready to leave. I said, you know, you signed our death warrant. And he got very upset. He's a big Malian guy, really beautiful guys, Tunkara. Anyway, I said, no, don't. He said, aren't you being melodramatic? And I said, no, they're not going to come out here and whack us. We're not going to literally end up sleeping with our fishes, right? I said, but we won't be here when you get back. The government took a year to even respond to the offer. And in February, they came in July, they made the offer in September. The government didn't accept it until the following September, but we had been forced out by February. They just cut off everything, our financing, everything just dried up and went away. Nobody answered the phone.
African Development Bank?
The African Development Bank offered a $20 million soft loan to the government of Rwanda.
And what did the government do with the money?
I have no idea. We were gone. I took them to court and sued the government for $5 million. It was a kangaroo court, in spite of the fact this is what we introduced into the record. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Okay.
This document is all of the all of the documentation that we had brought to the court, and the government had none.
Oh, Mr. Reese, shall we wind down here?
Okay. No, all I'm saying is, you said, how did we become uninvolved?
Yeah.
We were forced out. I took them to court, all the way to the Supreme Court. That took the last 5 years.
Oh, man.
And then it was time. People said, why did you do that? I said, because if we hadn't done it, they would always be able to say that if he had gone into our judicial system, he would have found justice. No way. We had the information. We had the documentation. We had played the game straight from start to finish. And they threw it out. They said, no, plus you owe us $80,000. I said, that's nice.
How long did it take you to recover from this loss?
Oh, it's not a matter of recovery. That's sort of like war. People talk about the scars, being scarred by war. No, war creates wounds. Okay? They don't heal. It doesn't mean you don't recover, but it does mean that you go on. So how long will it take me to recover? I don't know. I'll carry the memory with me, just like the memory of the good stuff. I'll carry it till I stop being conscious of this part of my existence, whatever. So recovery is not the question. I won't let it break me. It's just a part of being alive.
I'm sensing some bit of Buddhist philosophy.
A lot of it.
And how you talk about things.
Yeah, Buddhist, but it's kind of a cross between Gautama the Buddha and Sun Tzu, the guy who wrote The Art of War.
Uh-huh. Oh man, you're way above my head.
All right, well,
Sometimes.
you should read Sun Tzu. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of life lessons in Sun Tzu. So, for example, Sun Tzu writes that the only thing that your adversary is very careful not to call them the enemies. The only thing your adversary should expect from you is the unexpected. It's a good thing to keep in mind when you're involved in the kinds of things that I've been involved in my life.
What's your next serious involvement besides moving up here to Oregon?
I haven't a clue.
Uh-huh.
One thing I want to do now is I think I've zeroed in on a house. I found a house in Beaverton, mm-hmm. and I'm going to help the guy do some remodeling.
Beaverton, that's a suburb of Portland.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I met this guy, and we talked about things, and I said, hey, I can help do some of that stuff. He wants to get it ready as rental units. His mom just died about 3 or 4 months ago. And so he's also kind of grieving and stuff like that, and was really close to his mom. So I said I'd help him with it. He said, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. And we were making an arrangement where I'll be paying a reasonable amount of rent, which is hard to find in Portland and its environs.
Yes.
And I have found that out in the last 6 weeks. Uh-huh. Gentrification's taken its toll all over this country and all over the world.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
all this has happened pretty quick, huh?
Yes.
In just a week's time?
Yeah. Yeah,
You're
but
wasting your time, do you?
You got to jump. I think I told you before. One of my favorite writers is Kurt Vonnegut.
Yes.
And one of his characters says that strange travel suggestions are dancing lessons from God. All right. Now, God can be anything you want God to be, but the idea that I love the imagery. I love the fact, and strange. It's like stepping into space when you decide to say, I'm going here, I'm going there. You know? Yeah, I'll do that. People say, nobody wants to go to Lubumbashi. Nobody wants to go to Maiduguri. I can't imagine why. I've never been there. It's a challenge. Why not go? It's kind of tough. It's kind of tough on your family sometimes, but then you're the anchor in the family, and your wife is the anchor in the family. We are the family. So the family goes where my kids don't travel much. My son is in L.A. Oh, except for my daughter. My daughter is like me. But my sons, one's in L.A., and he's been there for 20 years. I mean, he goes other places. But his base is L.A. for some inexplicable reason. I can't understand why anybody would want to live in L.A.
Neither can I.
Right. But my other son, New York, he's been there for 10, 12 years. The other one is teaching high school up in the Boston area. So, you know, and they're not going anywhere. They got cement boots on or something. I don't know. But that's their life. They sure as hell traveled with me.
And you enjoy your life.
Do I enjoy it? Mm-hmm. It's been one hell of a good ride. seen a lot of places, done a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's been fun. My dad said the rent is always due. He said it's due on the good stuff, the bad stuff, and everything in between. There's got to be a balance. You got to pay for everything. And that's the balance. It's the yin, the yang, the equilibrium of life. Just don't let it, it's all so temporary. Why get it confused with anything that's, you know, it took me a long time to learn. Have they cut us off yet?
No, we're fine. We better stop now. So let's say just a minute or so to the viewers to close for this session, because you're going to come back on for another hour, okay? So say something in that camera and tell the viewers something.
Tell them something.
Yeah.
I'll look forward to seeing you guys next time. I have had a good time talking to Dr. Don, and whatever format he would like us to use is fine with me. I'll be here for a while. I have no plans to go outside of this area in the immediate future, so join us.
All right, thank you. So it looks like we better sign off now before they get run out of here. I got to tell you about my final message here. I got to tell you about the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Without the ACLU, our civil liberties would be further down the tube than they already are. And what else can I tell you? We got to end corporate personhood, take a country back, go to move to amend, so that we can amend the Constitution and say that corporations are not persons and money is not speech.
Thank you very
much. Thanks for watching. And remember KFC, KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you too, and you too. Thanks again for watching. Appreciate your tuning in. Talk to you next time. Good night.